Good morning, and welcome to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you to Talk of the Town for this Monday, December 21st. I'm Gary Stevens. We'll be open line following the 10 and 11 o'clock news blocks. Patty Vandenberg will be joining us in about an hour or so with what's new around Holland. In our 10:30 segment, we'll be chatting with State Senator, freshman, first-term state Republican Senator Roger Victory of Hudsonville, who represents Ottawa County in the state Senate. But on this third Monday of the month, our first half hour spent with the first-term Republican from Lawton, who represents Allegan County, or most of Allegan County in the state Senate. He is Aric Nesbitt. He's on the other end of our Zoom connection this morning. Aric, good morning and welcome back to WHTC.
Hey, good morning, Gary. Thanks for having me back, and I hope the sound sounds okay.
It sounds good. I have a funny feeling you are at work.
I'm always trying to work, so always trying to work for the folks in West Michigan. But yeah, we were in session all last week, and the House is in session today. And it looks like the House just passed, the State House just passed the extension of unemployment benefits and a COVID relief package this morning. I think about 20 minutes ago, they passed it.
Your thoughts about that package that the Senate had worked on last week?
Yeah, I think this is a good start. As I look at it, as we know, COVID continues to be front and center. And so that's what we're doing. We're providing additional resources for personal protective equipment, testing, vaccine distribution, nurses, and help for hospitals, along with those that are unemployed. And I think with the governor continuing to shut down businesses, we passed legislation to provide assistance to small businesses and workers negatively affected by the governor's orders. I think ultimately the federal government has far more resources than the state does. But I do think we, in the state legislature, working with my colleagues, I do think we're doing all that we can to help provide some relief to struggling small businesses and those that are unemployed.
I'll be blunt about this, Aric. Is it more of just a symbolic gesture because of the amount? Because the state can't give as much or really address the needs that perhaps the federal government can do. So basically, the state's doing something. They can't do a lot, but at least they're doing something.
Well, I think this is actually quite substantial. The thing is we don't run deficits in state government, and so we have to pay for it out of the either federal government that dollars that are collected from the federal government or taxpayer dollars, and so this is something where I do believe. Especially on the unemployment side of things, where folks that were forced to no fault of their own to the unemployment lines because of government orders, and especially we've seen recently with the administration's orders on shutting down of restaurants and small businesses, that I do think extending these benefits are going to make a difference to a lot of folks that are in the unemployment lines right now. So I think discounting this, I think is, I don't think the right thing necessarily to do. Now, the amount in terms of what's available and what's there, you're right that this relief package probably is in a much smaller side than the federal relief package, but it's something where I do think we need to provide the kind of benefits that we can provide for these small businesses that the governor has shut down, along with those that are unemployed.
395-1450, 395-1450 if you have a question. For State Senator Aric Nesbitt of Lawton, as a conservative Republican, I'm going to ask you, again, a blunt question. And it's not so much a state question, because you alluded to it by saying the balanced budget, and the state has to be balanced in that regard. Mm-hmm. How concerned are you that as we are going to probably see another federal stimulus package roll out, and another relief package probably will be needed later on top of what was already given? How concerned are you that we are mortgaging our future in order to take care of the needs of the present?
I'm very concerned. I mean, this is uh, long term that we're looking at between last fiscal year, this fiscal year, and next fiscal year at the federal level, probably $5 trillion worth of borrowing. That's with a T. $5 trillion worth of borrowing. And so this is something where I that I do know that real relief is needed, but it needs to be targeted, and we need to make sure that it's those that are actually affected by the economic suppression instead of just, I think, just a wide open money spigot I think like what we saw from Speaker Pelosi earlier this year that wanted a $3 trillion round 4 or 5 package. I don't know what round that the federal government's on right now. And I don't know whether they count some of the other ones half or full packages, but when you're talking trillions of dollars, that is money that is going to have to be paid back. That's money that's our kids and grandkids are going to have to pay interest on for years to come. And so I do think that it is important that is part of the discussion. But I do, as we look at it in terms of some of these small businesses and those that are unemployed, I do think there is some targeted relief that's there. Unfortunately, Congress didn't pass the $3 trillion effort that Speaker Pelosi was pushing, because then we would be looking over this 3-year period, probably a $7 to $8 trillion worth of borrowing instead of 5. So I know it's huge numbers, but it is something where that the challenge is, I think, a lot of times is that that everybody feels that they have to do something all the time. And sometimes it's best to take a step back, what's really necessary and what is really needed to help those that are actually in need. And those that are able to work from home, those that are making 6 figures, those individuals that are able to, pay for childcare and pay do, whether it's homeschooling or virtual schooling, I think are different than a lot of individuals making less than $40,000 or $50,000 a year that don't have those same options. And I think there's going to be a real challenge long term with lower income families that were forced to go to the unemployment lines. And so I do think there's help that's needed for there, but you have to, again, this is a $900 billion plan that looks like the federal government is passing. Huge numbers, just gigantic numbers. But it is something where it's a good third or a quarter from what the Speaker Pelosi was at to begin with, and was a bit higher than what I think Senator Mitch McConnell was pushing for last summer. But I do think there needs to be some relief for those that are unemployed and those small businesses that have been forced to shut down.
395-1450 is our number. If you have a question for State Senator Aric Nesbitt of Lawton, he'll be happy to take it at 395-1450. I'm going to quote MERS News from Friday, and knowing that you've been involved in this particular situation. The legislature would call for continued commitment to investigate allegations of fraud and irregularities in the state's election system under a resolution by Senator Ed McBroom up in the UP in Vulcan. It may have been taken up on Friday. With increased absentee voting appearing to be a new normal, Senate Resolution 37 calls on lawmakers to look at properly processing absentee ballots earlier, cleaning up the qualified voter file, and ensuring proper voter identity as part of future reforms, and a closer look into allegations of votes from the dead, mismatched signatures on absentee ballots, error-prone election equipment, and other issues. You've been involved in this particular situation, Aric. This resolution might be nice.
Yeah, this is a challenge to ourselves in terms of the legislature to actually make sure that we clean up any issues or problems to ensure that we have full faith in the conduction of these elections. I do think, taking a step back, there were clearly problems in Detroit: bias among election workers, lack of transparency, times when counting and transposing ballots were hidden from Republicans. In fact, my wife was at the Detroit TCF Center the day after the election as a poll challenger, and some of the stuff that she brought back was pretty reprehensible in terms of what she saw firsthand. Counting boards weren't matching. There was more counting boards that weren't matching in just Wayne County than all 82 counties combined. And Wayne County only makes up 20% of the state's population. We're talking 3/4 of Detroit's absentee ballot boards could not be recounted because of mismatches between who actually voted and their voter rolls. So there were real problems. They need to be fixed. As for voting machines, we know Michigan has paper ballots. I've always fought to keep those paper ballots here in Michigan. So I do think if a campaign believes voting machines are changing results, that they can request that hand recount. And I think that's very important to remember, is that you can go through and count those individually, and it will be revealed that voting machines count matches the hand recount. We saw that up in Antrim County, where I think between the machine count and the hand recount, there was a gain of 12 votes that were there. Election integrity is a top priority, and I think it needs to be a top priority to ensure that we protect our democratic republic and the values that we have here in the United States. And I think we need to clearly update some of these laws to make sure we have voter ID, make sure signatures match, and make sure that our qualified voter files are actually cleaned up. And this is something where the former Secretary of State Ruth Johnson effectively took off dead voters, people that have moved out of state, worked with other Secretary of States around the nation do this. And I'm appalled actually that Jocelyn Benson added those names back on those voter rolls, and then sent nearly 7 million absentee ballot requests out to people last year, and we figure about 500,000 to 800,000 of those requests went to folks that shouldn't have gotten them.
395-1450. Good morning. You're on the line with State Senator Aric Nesbitt.
Good morning. I would just like to say, all these politicians are wonderful talkers, but I think it's really pathetic what we're doing to our restaurants and our small businesses. Driving downtown Holland, I was so thrilled this summer when it was open and busy, people shopping, and they're still doing some of that. But if you've been through there lately and you've seen the Kara pub there on the corner on downtown with their heaters, people sitting there with winter hats and coats and trying to help these people make a living and stay in business. It's just pathetic. And that our government in our state now Whitmer has this new thing about opening the bowling alleys. We can walk into Walmart, Myers. We cannot walk into a restaurant, and I don't think it's fair at all. If you would follow the laws, the rules, the distancing, the masks, I see no reason we couldn't try to help these people out. And I think it's pathetic that everyone that works up there in Lansing doesn't have something to say more about all this. I know my mother earned her living being a waitress. I don't know how she did it, but she's pretty darn good with that dollar bill. You had to be. And for these people who are out of work, and a lot of people work in the restaurants, believe me, you would be surprised how much they would depend on that for their living. And, we don't realize how much of our social life, our interaction with each other is through the restaurants. And, our downtown in Holland, if the restaurants aren't open, do you think the rest of the businesses are going to be drawing a lot of people? People like to go downtown. We have snow melt. Wonderful. Well, I don't know what your answer will be, but anyway, I just want you to know my opinion.
All right. Appreciate the call. Thank you. 395-1450, Aric.
I think you should give her 5 minutes every day on your show to talk, because I think she's dead on. I think this is the real challenge. Is as you look at it, it's just heartbreaking. The restaurant owners that I talk to, the waitresses and wait staff and busboys that I talk to every week and here, and it's just heartbreaking to see the life savings of these small business owners be lost through really no fault of their own. And I think state government should allow them to operate safely. And the federal government needs to step up and I think provide real support. Is the governor and her administration has done a full economic suppression on these. I don't think the data and science really supports the closure of many of these restaurants. I've asked that the governor share with us what data and science she's using to order the closures. And she hasn't shared that with us. She hasn't shared it with us what those matrices are, and that's why the other week I called on the head of Health and Human Services, Director Gordon, to resign because he isn't providing us that information. This is how vindictive the administration is. When I asked for his resignation, they banned me. I was a small group of legislators that were on these data calls, and they banned me from these data calls because how dare I question a member of the Whitmer administration. And we know restaurants have experienced tremendous difficulty this year due to coronavirus and the forced economic suppression, and they need to be given the opportunity to operate safely so they can so they can survive. The Whitmer administration will not provide the metrics to allow restaurants to reopen. And now the administration claims certain safety standards must be met before reopening, but she refuses to share what those standards are with the restaurants. I just find it disgusting. Together we will get we will get through this pandemic. I mean, with the recent news on the vaccines, but along with health, small businesses should be given a chance because they want to keep their staff and customers safe.
395-1450. Let's get one more call before we have to take a break. Good morning. You're on the line with State Senator Aric Nesbitt.
Yeah, hi. You say that there's no data or science, but there's places like ArcGIS is a data place, and there's many places that provide the infection rate, the death rate. There's a daily tracking level as far as the state risk level. Right now, it's at 53.6 per 100,000. The county of Ottawa has dropped from, I think it was over 110, maybe 120 per 100,000, down to 50.7. Kent County's at 47. So you may think there's no science, but numbers are coming down. So it didn't happen when everything was open. It happened when things were closed, which is totally a travesty because I love going out to restaurants. We've eaten outside at the Caraw. We've gone out to other places. Our brewing company, New Holland, has outside seating. So there's people who are trying to make it a go. But to say that there's no science behind it, I don't think you're listening. And I mean, it's out there that the numbers are coming down. They weren't coming down when everything was open. So I think you need to look a little further and just do a little more research.
I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Aric?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of data that's out there, and there's a lot of science that's out there. You're right. But what is the matrix that the governor's using that says, oh, you know what? Casinos can reopen today, but restaurants have to be shut through the middle of January. What's the data and science that arcades had to be shut for the last month, but liquor stores were just fine to be open through this entire process? What was the data and science that, you could use a canoe, but you couldn't use a motorboat? That's what I'm asking for, is what is the matrix that the governor is using to decide what's open and what's closed? And why is it that it seems to be the most effective are the small business owners in our small towns that are hit the hardest when you see these huge, big box stores that are continually open? Record profits are being made by these huge corporations and companies nationally, and yet our small town business owners are being driven off to the sidelines. I don't think that's data and science. I think that's political science and public relations. And so what I'm asking for is what is driving her decision makings to pick what's open and what's closed, and she's not willing to share this. And why is it that if you look at the data, California's probably had the toughest economic suppression out of any of them. Florida's probably had one of the lightest touches, and yet cases in California over the last month continue to skyrocket where they haven't been in Florida. So I think there is something where we want to see what we want to see from our own point of view, instead of saying what is the actual data and science that this administration is relying on to pick what's open and what is closed.
Good morning. You're on the line with Aric Nesbitt.
Yes, first of all, Gary, I'd like to thank him for all that he tries to do without any cooperation from our governor. And he's absolutely right. I mean, I'm a bowler, I'm on a bowling league. Now, she opens up the bowling alley. I haven't seen these people for a month or more. How are we going to go into a bowling alley? And I know half of them won't have their mask on. So is it okay to do that versus going to a restaurant with my family and sitting in a booth where they have it all social distance very nicely? I mean, and that doesn't make any sense. And the gentleman that called earlier, he's got to look at these things like you guys do. But I just feel bad that you don't get any cooperation.
All right. Appreciate the call. Thank you, Aric.
Yeah, I think I think you're making a good point. I think what it's coming down to is personal responsibility, and taking a look at is living in a free country where those that are governed rely on the electorate and on individuals in the United States, and it's up to each of us to make those right decisions and try to work to make sure that we protect our neighbors and our family and our friends, and that's something where that should be challenged upon each of us. And I think from the beginning, as we look at it, I think the challenge was that instead of shutting down the entire private sector of our economy, that we should have challenged our private sector and our economy to step up and to do the right thing in each of us. And so, yeah, it's each of us to, make sure we wash our hands, make sure you take another thought about, whether you have just your immediate family over for Christmas or others, what is their age or underlying health conditions? Because we know that the older you are with more underlying health conditions and the heavier you are, the more the COVID, affects you, and the worse it can get. And I've known people that have died, and it's a tragedy, and it's sad. And we need to do what we can, each of us, to protect those. But when it comes to this administration, she refuses to cooperate. She refuses to work with the legislature, and continues to go it alone. And she will not publicly share what data, what science, what matrices she's using to make the decisions that she's making. And we've had the chief epidemiologist, the medical director of the state, the head of the health and human services for the state, and we asked, what is the specific data and science she's using to close certain industries and open other industries? And what is the matrix that they're using to say that's going to actually be allowed to open? And she won't share that, and that's it's beyond heartbreaking. That's very upsetting.
I wish we had more time. There's a few other things I wanted to bounce off of you about the situation, but unfortunately, as they say, we're out of time. It goes by so fast. State Senator Aric Nesbitt of Lawton. Want to thank you very much for joining us today on WHTC's Talk of the Town program. Wish you and your young family well, a blessed Christmas and a happy start of the new year. And if all goes well, let's do this again in January. Aric, thank you.
See you in the new year, Gary, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all your listeners. God bless.
Thank you very much, Aric Nesbitt of Lawton on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.